Awesome. To make sure that we respect your time, I will start now, and more people will join us. So Charles, if you can help me with the slides, I can do a quick intro. Okay, so my name is Lana. I am the head of revenue here at SafetyWing. That means that I build different revenue channels for our company. I'm also a Y Combinator founder myself, advisor to a few different startups, and quite a big remote work avid traveler. Discovered remote work back in 2008, and I'm very passionate about it. So you will kind of like hear my perspective as like a remote first company. We can go to the next one. The agenda today, we're going to start with a poll. So basically asking you a couple of questions. We'll go into the panel discussion, and then we'll leave plenty of room at the end for the Q&A. We go next. Okay, so the first question is your organization borderless? This helps us understand kind of like where everyone is coming from and how many people you have in different countries. Okay, so we got 50% of you that voted, maybe more can vote, 60%. Okay. Okay, nice, 70%. That's a good turnout. Great. Okay, so it looks like the majority are in 2 or more countries, and then about 31% are not. Some plan to become borderless and some do not want to become borderless, which is fine. Awesome. Let's go into it, Charles. What is the next one? Okay, cool. So I don't know if any of you know what SafetyWing is, but what we do in a couple of words is that we provide global benefits for the remote workforce. We basically provide health insurance, retirement, and income protection in over 180 countries. You can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, we started out with Nomad Insurance. Now we have remote health. We're going to have remote doctor, remote retirement, etc., to build out the global benefits package so that when you are hiring remotely, you're able to cover both employees and contractors with the right benefits. And now we can go into the presentation of the panel. So it's my pleasure to welcome Maria, Tara, and Sarah to the panel. If you guys want to turn on your video and then maybe go one by one, tell us a bit about you, like your background, as well as why are you qualified to be on this webinar today? Tara, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Tara Sullivan. I'm the VP of Marketing and Omnipresent. I'm delighted to be here today, Lona. Thank you so much. I have a real interest in basically borderless hiring and remote work. I think it's really important from diversity, and it's also really important from the perspective of democratizing looking for talent, right? So Omnipresent provides employer of record, which basically allows you to set up to hire anybody anywhere. We operate in about 150 countries, but basically kind of my play in it, I've been in this industry for about 3 years. I think it's really important from a social experiment thing as well that it works well. So yeah, that's me.
I'm going to go next.
Yep, Sarah, since you're next to Tara.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Hawley, CEO and founder of Growmotely. We are a global remote work marketplace, essentially, helping any company anywhere in the world find, hire, and retain talent anywhere in the world. Very much engaged in kind of building this redefined future of work for humanity. Super excited about everything that global teams bring to to each other. That diversity piece for sure is what drives me every day, is working in a global team, even as a smaller company, 5 people, 5 different countries, the richness that that brings to everybody's lives and how it breaks down all of these stories of separation and otherness that kind of our countries have instilled in each and every one of us, really. So I'm excited for this future, and just really happy to be here. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's going to be exciting conversation.
Maria?
Hello, everybody. So I'm Maria. I'm the head of talent at Hoffi. Hoffi is an organization that actually takes care of what we call the physical layer of remote working. So you're thinking about, okay, I want to hire remotely, but how do you actually onboard people remotely? How do you make sure that they have a great, amazing experience from the beginning? And Hoffi is the place to do that. And for myself, I have been recruiting remotely for a very, very long time. So I actually came before it was cool with the pandemic, and it kind of really shifted things a little bit. But I have been watching this space grow from within as I am trying to grow remote teams myself. Me and my team try to do that. So very excited to share some of the experiences that we've had.
Amazing. Thank you, Maria. And Charles, I think we have one more poll before we go into the discussion. Amazing. Okay, so which trend are you most excited to hear about today? We actually put this out on LinkedIn, and we got an interesting kind of like voting. So maybe after you guys vote, I will reveal what most people voted on LinkedIn. Awesome. Remote first culture. Okay. Interesting. You guys are voting very differently than LinkedIn. Okay, great. So today's audience, you guys, what you want to hear about is building a remote first culture. That's the first thing you want to discuss. And I love this topic, and the people that are on this panel are really perfectly suited for this. Charles can share with you that one slide from LinkedIn. They were actually more excited about borderless hiring, which actually also is a good topic that we will cover today. We will cover all 4 of these topics. And as I mentioned, if you have questions, do go ahead and enter them as soon as possible. There's quite a few of you on this call, so we hope that we can get to answer everyone's questions, because I think it's more fun when it's a bit more interactive versus us just talking here. Amazing. Cool. So let's go into it, ladies. I'm really happy that all of us here are, you know, female, so we represent quite a bit. It's quite interesting, and yeah, this is a very cool topic that we're going to talk about today. It's the future of work, and what better thing to start than that? You know, how do we build that remote first culture? We know that people want to continue to work remotely. I know the World Economic Forum put out some data showing that 2/3 of the people want to work flexibly, and 1/3 of them said they're willing to quit if they are made to go back to the office. I know that you're seeing a lot of information on Bloomberg. You're seeing Elon Musk saying you must come back to the office. You're seeing real estate moguls wanting people to go back to the office so that they can also make more money. So I'm really curious to see what the experts say, and how can we, you know, build that remote first culture. So yeah, maybe we can start with the first question. What is a first remote culture? Maybe Sarah, you can start with this. You did write a book on conscious leadership, so I'm very interested to see what you have to say about this.
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff. I think, you know, really what's so interesting about culture is that in the office context, we think culture is what it's not. So that was probably the misnomer that was happening before, where it was easy to say, well, you know, our office is really cool. We have like free food, and we get like Wednesdays we order pizza and then we have like a ping pong table or whatever it might be, and mistake that for culture. And really that's kind of more like space and place. And I'm not saying all companies did that, but when I think about culture, what it is to me is, how are we showing up for each other and for this organization? And most companies who are in touch with this would express this through a series of values or ethos or something like that, which is really kind of the words and the languages and the framework around what do we embody as people in this organization, and what do we expect also then from our customers and our the community that is whatever this company is. And that's the way I like to think about culture. So one of our values, as an example, is transparency and candor, and that's something that we embrace, is having timely, transparent, open conversations with our team, and we do that with the ecosystem that is Growmotely. When we understand our values as an organization and as individuals, not aspirationally, but what we actually are, which is the most important thing, I think. Not putting a value up that you think sounds nice, that you would like to be, but actually who you are. We attract in people who also embody and embrace that value. And we naturally have people move away when they're not. If somebody's not into transparency and they come to Growmotely, they're going to be like, this is like too much for me. Like there's too much closeness, too much oversharing, it might feel like, whatever. And that's really what I think culture is. And the gift for me, of remote, when I turned my companies remote, which was back in 2014, was I stopped looking at all of the stuff that I was distracted with, like how tidy was our office, and is our kitchen always stocked with milk and tea and coffee and whatever, and are the plants thriving, and all of this stuff that was really quite superficial. And I started looking more at, how are we interacting with each other? How are we treating each other? How are we showing up every day? What are the kind of things that we strive for and hold ourselves to here? And what are the things that don't matter to us here as much? And when I say here, I just mean in this organization, in this company, not this physical space. And so I personally became a much better leader when I went remote, because I started to look at the right things and stopped focusing on the wrong things, I believe, which were a lot more micromanaging as well. Because, and I'll just shed one more perspective, obviously I'm very remote first bias, but having to share physical space with a bunch of people for 40+ hours a week is a lot on your physical system. Like you're having to manage everybody's energy and everybody's personal habits, and a lot more conversation. That there's benefit to that, but there's also just a lot more that you're interacting with every single day. And so when we have a little more space and we can set ourselves up for the place that we as individuals like to work, and we can interact with each other at a pace that's more in flow for us, and then we can really start to focus on, like, what is this actual culture that we want to embody as people, and not so much distracted by the physical presence.
That's really interesting.
Maria or Tara, did you have something?
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting from the perspective of what you're talking about, and how you changed the leader when you left the office. I think one of the things that's really interesting to me after COVID is that, a lot of people are being encouraged to come back, like Lena was saying, in order to, fill up those offices that were all empty over the pandemic. But from the research I've seen, the people who want to go back are, the white men, right? A lot of women don't want to go back because they've got more, they've got a better balance. They're not trying to do everything. There isn't, their second 8-hour shift doesn't start at 6 o'clock when they walk in the door. So I think if you think about that kind of culture, like a lot of people talk about Slack's really important because you need transparent, asynchronous communication and all that kind of stuff. But actually, it is about showing up much more in a more humble way. You have to ask way more questions. You have to be way more curious. You can't make assumptions because, you got a sense from a meeting because somebody was kind of behaving in a certain way, because all you're seeing is this square. So I think we've had to lean in way more to the communications and find ways to communicate the same piece of information in lots of different ways, so we make sure everybody's absorbed it, especially if it's you know, if it's difficult to hear, or if it's, you know, if it's not just all great news, you know. So I think that's really important, is the comms side of it, to make sure people still feel psychologically safe, even though you're only seeing that little square of their lives.
Absolutely. And I think, kind of jumping off of that, one thing that, you know, as again, having to be on the HR side of things, building a remote first culture doesn't have to be like an overnight thing. If anything, that can be quite a shift if it's not managed properly. So it can be a journey. So for example, going from core hours to fully async rather than fully async immediately. I've been quoted before in saying that when the pandemic first started and everybody was panicking, and I remember I was on like another webinar where everybody that had never worked, like companies from all across that had never worked remotely before, were talking about, well, how do we maintain the office, the company culture? And I was thinking to myself, very similar to what you said, Sarah, like if you were concerned about your company culture disappearing with the office, you didn't have a company culture, you had an office culture, like who can choose up to whom, etc. There was a lot of white noise happening where it's like, oh, it's like a lot of, in HR there was like a lot of studies like, what about the young people with the opportunities being robbed? And it's like, well, in my opinion, if you really manage it properly, so then it highlights the work that they do rather than who they go to have a cigarette break outside with, or who they manage to, you know, kind of like talk up to when they were grabbing the water or something like that. So it really focuses on the work that you do, the value that you bring at the company. And I think in the communication side, one thing that I like to do with the company is kind of create different communication channels. So there is flexibility overall. So as you're kind of moving your journey towards hopefully fully async and something, you know, more along those lines, not every team can do that. Not every company can do that from the get-go. Don't beat yourself up if you can't. But if you are wanting to move alongside those lines, maybe creating like an informal space where people can exist. Like I've said this before, and we're at the moment in review of whether we want to create like a Discord channel where people can just join in without the square, just audio. It kind of lessens that sort of like, I need to be present. Like I have come from the gaming background where Discord is all the time there. You know, sometimes I'm on Discord, I'm just quiet, but we just exist as people, you know, alongside each other if you are missing that interaction. And then having the other flexibility, you know, to kind of like when exactly you appear, you know, how you appear, and, you know, having that, but that takes actually education. So being kind of creating that remote first culture is all of these things together, but it kind of, you know, it needs a lot of education for some people, because it's not natural for every single person.
I think I would love to just add on to, like, it's so interesting how much we underestimated our ability to maintain the essence of our connection online. If you really think about it, we've been building relationships online, I mean, since Facebook, 2007 or whatever is really when it started, and it's exploded from there. And obviously with technology and being able to live in different places and FaceTime and all of that. So we really underestimated that aspect of something that was actually very normal. And I love what you said, Maria, and I think of it of like, imagine you have this great friend and you get on really well because you both do yoga, you love being in nature, and you love talking about philosophy, and that friend moves to another city. All of a sudden, do you panic that, like, how are we going to maintain our connection? Like, okay, you might need to put some effort into the way that you communicate, just like you did when you were in person. You still had to make effort to go to yoga class together and to have dinner on Wednesday nights. But like, the fundamental reason why you're friends is because of yoga and nature and philosophy or whatever, like this shared kind of value set that you have. That doesn't go away just because you live in a different city. And I think that's the culture piece versus the cadence and the rhythms and the different things that we actually do and communication tools. So yeah, I love what you said about, like, did they really even have a culture if that was the first concern?
Those are really great points. I think because some of our audience here also is not remote and they don't plan to go remote, I want to also maybe include them in, because what I want to say to those joining that don't want to go remote is that at Y Combinator, which I went through, they say build something people want. And I want to encourage you as company leaders, HR leaders, to ask your people, what do they want? If they're looking for more flexibility, if they're looking for this type of way that we've been working the last couple of years, then I'd say you should try to listen to them, because otherwise you will experience a brain drain. At SafetyWing, we are remote first, obviously, and we have 100% retention, which is kind of like unheard of. It's because of the culture that we have built, but also the flexibility that we give our team. And for me, a mother of two, it's really like life-changing. And I like what Tara said about the white males. Actually, my husband is a white male, and his life has been changed by working remotely because he's very much family oriented. So you can be a white male and you can love this culture, but yes, we are driven sometimes by greed and by profit, and people wanting that old way of doing things, which the 9 to 5 is literally 100 years old. And now we have the tools, like Sarah said, that we've been having these tools for the last 20 years. And it's all about using these tools to our benefit and letting people really show up, bring the best of themselves in the way that they want to work. So if this makes sense to you, I hope so. But
and I think if you're in a hybrid, so we're in remote first, right? So Omnipresent doesn't have any offices. Once a year we go on a retreat where we all get together, which is phenomenal, and every team kind of meets up at some stage in the other half of the year. But if you're a hybrid, it's actually harder, because you have to make sure that for everybody who's in the room, you are spending as much time listening to them and watching their body languages, if you're the chair of the meeting, as the people who are remote. So you have to make sure that they're taken care of even more so. And I was doing some work over the summer, and eBay in Ireland has had remote for a long time, and they track how many people have got promoted who are remote versus who are in the office and all that kind of stuff. So it's actually, you have a lot more work to do as you go hybrid to make sure that they are being treated equally and that people feel as much of a part of the culture, like Maria was saying, as somebody who's walking into that office every day and seeing all the stuff on the walls and reading all the stuff in the lunchroom,
Yeah, I also want to make sure that we move the conversation along because we have a lot to talk about. Maybe do you guys want to share a couple of nuggets in terms of like how maybe the people joining can prepare a winning remote culture over the next 2 or 3 years? I know we said a lot of things in the past 10 minutes, but maybe like 1 or 2 best practices that, whether you are in 2 or 3 more countries or whether you don't plan to go remote, how can we maybe help, since this is the most voted kind of topic?
I think from my side, the advice would be have the strong identity and be transparent with that identity. If you want people to be like, no, we are going to be that one company that does this thing in this specific way, go ahead, own it. There are bound to be people that are going to be attracted to your mission, to your values, but you have to be transparent with it, even if it is a cantankerous mission of some kind, right? So you have to be quite transparent with it. And then the second thing being, if possible, again, just giving that flexibility. So being able to prepare. So very often, here's the thing. In HR, very often, when you try to tell people, oh, we need to become more flexible, that means a lot more work for HR, a lot more regulations, a lot more all of these things. And if you, however, kind of have like as HR, you kind of start hopefully seeing the benefits that there are from even offering some sort of flexibility, then create the tools and the education before or alongside with actually going and moving ahead with going remote first or flexible or hybrid or whatever. So strong identity and preparation and education.
And mine would be communication. I really think you have to lean into the various ways to communicate.
My dog is barking, so I'm sorry. I just ran off to try to get my dog to stop barking. So that's part of the remote life, but skip me on that one. I'm sorry.
We're truly living it. We're truly living the remote first lifestyle.
Yeah. I think she's settled down now.
Yeah, but Sarah, basically what we're saying is like, one or two nuggets in terms of how to build this remote culture in the next 2 to 3 years for those companies that would like to do that. And actually, Maria mentioned a very good point, which she said that when you tell HR leaders that we're going to be more flexible, they are worried about all the regulations that you're adding to their plates. But what I want to mention is because of companies like yours, all three of you, and ours, it makes it a lot easier for HR leaders to be able to be more flexible, because I know a lot of you don't know how to go through this stuff. Like, how do you hire borderlessly, or how do you provide benefits, or how do you do payroll? And this is exactly what we provide and make it super easy. So don't be scared when your people are saying we need more flexibility. Don't worry about the regulation. We're able to help. So let's continue the conversation.
And one of the things that I think on that is like the whole world is figuring it out right now. In a lot of cases, we don't actually have all of the regulation yet of like where it maybe is going to end up. So companies like all of ours are figuring out how to use the current regulations to stay compliant as we can. And I know probably many of us, I know we are working actively with governments on creating white papers and making recommendations about how things should go forward. So definitely looking to partner with companies like ours and others who are in this space, who are both navigating the current world regulation and actively helping to create the future is, absolutely worth doing, and just powerful to sort of coming to these webinars and surrounding yourself by information and learning from people who have done it before. The whole world is and has changed. It is scary. As you mentioned, Lona, the old model is over 100 years old. Like, we have all of this incredible opportunity and this gift of the internet and everything else to work in new ways. And it's scary and it's different, and we have to go through a messy, chaotic period where we don't quite know exactly what to do, but that's not a reason not to do something. I mean, humanity, how we've even become everything that we've become is through innovating and evolving and changing and embracing new things. And I think that's the thing, is like give yourself and your team some grace as you move through this evolution and this shift, and don't beat yourselves up if you don't get it completely right. Accept the fact that there might be some mistakes, there might be some mess, there might be some chaos.
Great. Perfect. So the next topic we'll go to is borderless hiring, because we don't have a lot of time and we have 3 more to cover. This is an interesting topic, and I know that both Tara and Sarah can say a lot here. I'm sure Maria as well. But this would be interesting. Where do you go to find borderless workers?
Yeah, so we allow you to go anywhere, right? So you can pretty much hire anybody anywhere in the world, but we recommend our customers decide what level of compliance and risk they want, right? So there's some countries where it's hard to hire people, and there's a lot of requirements on the employer, and especially on the benefit side, there's a lot of requirements. So we kind of get people to think about what level of risk, what's their appetite of risk to take. So we have, but basically I think the real focus is to just figure out where you're seeing most of that talent, and if there's lots of that talent, go to that country, and you can figure that out. And there's lots of top 10 places to find just developers and all that kind of stuff coming out now, because there's so many people looking for that kind of that country level of top talent you're going to find in Bali or whatever.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm sure you have more on this.
From
Sorry,
my end, sorry, no worries. From my end, I actually probably am going to go a little bit more operational in terms of, because as the head of talent, me and my team are constantly in those platforms that are finding people. So there's definitely a lot of platforms out there that you are that you can certainly advertise. Now, one pro tip is to, again, think about the companies, whether you're okay with being fully async or you need some sort of time zones. So operationally, for each of the roles that you have, think about if you have any time zone restrictions, additionally any taxation restrictions. So very often revenue generating roles cannot be hired usually outside of the location where you have a registered entity. Even with like an employer of record or something, that it can be quite a difficult hurdle to kind of like, again, try to match. So that is something, again, to be mindful of. Not every single role can be hired like fully remotely at all times, unless you're willing to do some sort of, like I remember when TikTok were setting up in Spain, they basically had all their sellers close deals, but then the signature was in the UK. So it's like all of these shenanigans and things like that were basically being moved around. Now, the other thing is, outside of time zone, things like that, there are platforms out there that have existed for a very long time. So the ones that I personally, and sorry, Sarah, I haven't necessarily used all
No worries.
platforms, but the ones that you have specifically used are WeWork Remote, Remote OK, Remotive as well. And there's also a few that are more specifically aimed at minorities and people of color, so those remote POC and remote women as well, which are quite useful. So yeah, in general, I also do like to go to specific communities that are like, no digital nomad communities and all these things. They are usually quite useful, especially if you get the hiring managers to actually go and engage with those communities already, because they are part of that community. One I'm thinking of it specifically is tech hiring. In tech hiring, we do engage quite often with the specific, maybe like a Slack or a Discord community. And we kind of have mostly the line managers who are techies themselves be part of those communities, and that's kind of where you find talent a little bit more operationally speaking.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I mean, Growmotely is this hub of talent, and on the talent side, it's a hub of companies that are remote first, remote only, and focused on culture first hiring and culture first companies. So we are a place that you can go to find that talent. In terms of this conversation as well, like I'm probably going to talk a little bit less about the risk and the regulation and more about the future. And Growmotely has really been built for the future and where we see the future, which is freedom and independence and individual sovereignty and empowerment. And that's where we favor the independent contractor model. And we as Growmotely contract the individuals and take that responsibility on for like figuring out the legal side, and potentially we'll go into employer of record stuff if and when we need to, and we have a bunch of partnerships with companies like that. But where the world that I see in the future is this really empowered world where we see companies and people more as people coming together to do great work. And like how they do it, where they pay their taxes, where they live, really should be of their own discretion and own design and desire. And that's the world that we want to build and hope that will come to fruition for many more people. Sondre, who's the founder of SafetyWing, co-founder, I think, and myself talk a lot about borderless worlds. And we started the Plumia company, SafetyWing started the Plumia first country on the internet, and this is the direction that my mind goes and what I'm really excited about. But a more borderless world in general, where yes, no longer our employment needs to be tied to the country, the state, the city that we live in, and all of the complexity that has existed for the last hundreds of however many years. So I'm really excited about a future where individuals are empowered to be borderless, be wherever they are, and take their job with them.
That's great. And actually, Sarah, you touched on whether you recommend hiring employees or contractors, and I think you're on the side of contractors.
Yeah, and I wouldn't like to say it as a recommendation. It's something I favor because I like to give full freedom and flexibility to my team, and that the Growmotely platform is really built for companies that want to embrace that. We don't have like leave or anything. It's just like do whatever you want, whenever you want, organize yourself. If you're going to be on leave and unable to do something, figure out how it's going to get done in your absence. Obviously, if somebody's in an emergency, we would step in and help them out, but really a much more empowered state where the agreement between the company and the individual is so much more around like, I agree to take on these areas of responsibility to show up and lead this part of the company, and the company is trusting and empowering them to do that. So yeah, and then I mean we're partnered with SafetyWing on the benefits side, and just so excited about companies like you guys building benefits with a global perspective in mind. Like this is where we need to get to. We need to be building a whole new world that is not related to states and provinces and cities that we live in and tied down in government regulation.
Yeah. I was actually going to go into the next topic, which is remote and borderless benefits. What are you guys seeing out there? Which benefits do people kind of like prefer most today in terms of something that follows them from country to country and you can give to everyone regardless of where they live?
Yeah, I can jump off quickly with our benefits marketplace that we've built, and we've really built it for this next generation in mind. So everyone collects some benefits dollars and then they can spend them on whatever they like. And we're definitely using SafetyWing's global health insurance product. And as you guys develop more products, we'll add them. But what we're really seeing is millennials and the next generation and this kind of evolution of global workers, they're looking for both that safety and security aspect, but also professional, personal growth and development and support. So things like coaching and therapy and education are things that we're putting into the marketplace. And the fact that that can all be done globally, it doesn't really matter where the therapist or the coach is or where the course is that you're undertaking it. So really just giving access to people all over the world and allowing them to build their own benefits that's appropriate for them in different stages of their life based on where they're living at the time, all of that. So I think
Awesome.
freedom and choice. Yeah.
And Tara,
And
Maria, do you?
Yeah, so from our side, I suppose I'm thinking about the process more than Sarah is, because we're looking at share options and how to make sure that they're, dealt with across different jurisdictions. Holidays, a lot of companies in the States are doing kind of take vacation when you want to, whereas there's a lot of countries where you actually have to give a certain number of days and they have to be taken in a certain way and that kind of thing. So we're trying to figure out almost a country specific index of benefits that you can and can't give, so, and making that relevant then to employers when they're deciding kind of where to hire people. So
and
yeah,
that's actually something to build up of, kind of like combining the last two questions together about whether they're employee and contractor, because in some jurisdictions, it's actually the zero difference in like taxation and things like that. So if anything,
right.
It creates a lot more onus. So for example, here in the UK, the IR35, Spain and Portugal equalize the taxation rates. And you have to be careful when giving benefits. So for example, giving it through a platform could be one way to minimize risk, because otherwise, if you try to give some directly, you actually may be creating both an establishment risk and
Correct.
also a kind of in general an implied employer relationship without having an establishment. So there are all of these slight pitfalls there, whilst of course we would love to be able to move into the full borderless in general when you are
I love
across multiple jurisdictions. Like I'm immediately, again, my HR brain is just going like, I would love to get that one day. I would love to get that one day. But again, like you have to be careful about, even for example, us through Hofi, right? If we have somebody through an employer of record in another country, technically speaking, they're still not our employee. So you have to be able to adhere to the jurisdiction. So for example, in France, you have to provide health benefit, which is like a separate health insurance. You have to provide a lot of different things. So you have to meet each country's standard minimum. So that's why sometimes as a contractor, it's better. But then when you try to provide something like, for example, we provide a more cash benefits, right? Which are sometimes a little bit more easier to administer. They can be a little bit more flexible. They don't create the taxation, like the VAT, for example, is a little bit more easier to kind of justify, like, okay, this isn't a VAT taxable benefit simply because it is a personal development budget or something like that. So you have to be careful with, like, again, sorry to be the Debbie Downer of this conversation, but that this is why, for example, something like a platform that can manage these and can tell you, like, do you know what, you're okay to cover this, you're okay to provide this benefit in this jurisdiction, can be an easy way to go rather than trying to go about it yourself, because you can inadvertently create a lot more trouble for yourself, especially if you're a company that's trying to trade globally. Yes, you can try to kind of be like, you know what, I have a contractor, they have to figure out the taxation on their own. But if you are trying to be a globally trading country and then later on you try to trade in the country where the contractor maybe has defrauded for tax or something like that, and you have found to have traded with this person, you may be ending up on a register that you can't actually legally trade in that specific country. So if you are a global business, you have to be a little bit more careful.
Yes, and also feel free to connect with all of us on LinkedIn. Like if you have more specific questions on this, just definitely, yeah, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're all there. So just the first and last name. I will move on to the last kind of topic, and then we'll take your questions. We're only going to have about 15 minutes at best. So maybe if I could get some technologies that you guys would recommend for kind of like a tech stack for the borderless kind of like company or the future company.
Other than our own, that we
well, I was going to say, you know, Slack, Monday.com, all that kind of stuff. But one of the really important things is the onboarding and how you feel when you're hired. And one of the highlights of me being onboarded was getting my Hofi kind of list of goodies that I could choose. And it was really grown up because I was given a budget and I could decide what I wanted to spend that on. So the onboarding technologies are insanely important, as well as the usual stuff of setting up payments and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the Hofi is amazing, really, really good. So yeah, but all of that kind of asynchronous communication. But then I think for managers, you know, Notion boards and all that kind of stuff to tell a story over the last 6 months of how things have gone. But I think people really have to speak to each other and be curious, and you know, I think that's incredibly important.
I would like
My
to make the
favorite.
case.
Oh,
Sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
I would like to make the case for a very good, depending on what part of the journey you're in, a really good HRS. I understand that there's been a lot of backlash against certain HRSs, and some companies are trying to build their own and all of these things. But again, the more countries you add, unless you are trying to kind of go as lean as possible, whatever it may be, it will add a layer, at least a tiny layer of complexity. So having a good HRS where you can keep track of, okay, we have people in all of these places, and there are some really nice ones out there that can actually show you like in a nice graph and a map, and you can later on just kind of be like, look at where we are, is a beautiful thing. So investing in a good HRS is actually probably underrated, but I do want to shout it out.
Yeah, so Basecamp is one of my favorite pieces of technology. I've been running my companies on Basecamp for as long as I can remember, 10-ish years, all the different versions. But from having a chat kind of like Slack to projects and task lists and documents and everything to just be in one place. So kind of like that is the hub of our business. And then we have other pieces of technology obviously that plug into that. But for remote teams, I mean, Basecamp is amazing. It's a fantastic company as well who have been fully remote. They're a company that I modeled off back in 2014 when I had this wild idea of turning my companies remote. And I think at the time Basecamp was 50 or 60 people. And I was like, you know what, if they can do it, I can turn my 15-person company remote. And then there's some other like really big remote companies that also I've always looked to and said, well, if they can do it with 1,000 people, we can do it. Obviously, there's so many companies now providing that inspiration. But yeah, I would like remotely as well is that entire HR stack for smaller businesses. But yeah,
I would agree. Take a look at the companies that are here, and then Notion, Slack, Teamflow, whatever else that could be helpful. But we have a lot of questions, guys. So ladies, if we can just maybe answer very quickly so that we can get through a lot of them. The first one, it says
one person at a time maybe to answer.
Yeah, exactly. Because like some of them are directed to Tara. This one, it says, I agree, online relationships are powerful. Online are powerful, and I experience this via remote studies. However, I feel face-to-face interactions are necessary from time to time. Do you actually arrange for any face-to-face networking from time to time within smaller or larger groups? And then Tara, you said, is in-person attendance to your annual retreat mandatory?
Oh, We lost your audio, did we?
Sorry, we encourage everybody to go, but it's absolutely not mandatory. We have a rule that if one of the leaders is in any country where we have people, they host a dinner, and that's not mandatory either. So you literally could go through your entire career in Omnipresent without meeting anybody if you wanted to in person. But one of the things we do is we have a team offsite in the other part of the year where we don't have the retreat, and that works really well. But again, nobody has to go. There's no requirement.
Yeah, same for us. We have 4 retreats a year. That's where we do the face-to-face networking, and it works really well. It's about a week out of the quarter, and then more teams can meet as they need outside of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you get leading people requires emotional intelligence? Do you think remote workers need to have a high EQ? Maybe Sarah or Maria?
I just think generally in life, working on your EQ will help you out. So yeah, I don't know if it's any more or less, really, like, no, I don't think it's any more or less. I think it's just something that the more that you work on your emotional intelligence, understanding yourself, understanding the world around you, and bringing that into your interactions and your relationships, which you are relating with the people that you work with, whichever way you want to look at it, it is going to be beneficial for sure.
Okay, and then beyond Slack, how do you coordinate workflow and communication among remote workforce? We talked about this Basecamp.
Basecamp, yeah.
And
Monday.com. We do
Monday.com.
our flows on Monday.com, yeah.
Perfect. What are your steps as leaders and VPs to become an employer of choice?
I would say knowing your culture and being able to communicate that really effectively. That way you're attracting people in that actually resonate with that, and then there's a flow-on effect, because you're an employer of choice for people who want to work in a place that is embodying the things that you are, versus trying to live up to some arbitrary standard that apparently everyone wants. Although I do agree with looking at trends, like you said, Lona, build something that people want. We're definitely seeing trends toward flexibility in remote work, so worth considering.
Yeah, and I think having all your people as kind of that, if they really enjoy what they're doing, they have their network, and you can a lot of the time find similar people to bring in. So becoming, people understanding that this is, that they can still do a job that they adore with really smart people, but can do it on their terms. Like Sarah was saying, that freedom is incredibly important.
Okay, great. So maybe the next one, Maria can answer. A lot of people say they are okay when we ask them how they are. What to look for, or what should we ask to them to tell us the true, like really how they are doing working from home? It's a hard question because it's not written.
It is a hard question. One thing that I always kind of took away from my days as a recruiter, and still continuing to now, is don't ask open-ended questions. So for example, are you okay is a closed, sorry, do ask open-ended questions. Sorry, I meant the other way around. Do ask open-ended questions. So for example, for my team, I'm always like, what can I do today to support you? So don't ask in like, can I support you? Can I help you? What is it that I can do? So that kind of very often does help people to be like, actually, if I really want to answer the question, this is the thing that you can do to support me, right? So that's what I would usually try to establish. The second thing is, I think very often is to gauge the, more of an indirect investigation really, is to gauge the engagement, what I kind of call it. It's a very silly play on words, but really kind of start inviting people to maybe social events, things like that. And if they don't want to engage in those, is it because they don't have the time? Is it because they're overwhelmed? Is it because then this is not speaking to them? Like, what exactly is happening there? Look at the trends, look at engagement surveys and things like that, but look at the trends of how people show up, like Sarah said. So, and then ask the very kind of open-ended questions, like, okay, I've noticed that you haven't, how can I support you to show up to these social events?
Great. We have like 30 other questions.
Oh, shit. I'll just add something really quickly, is like, are you sharing with your team how you are doing? Are you asking for the support that you need? And in doing so, are you creating a safe space for people to actually show up as how they are, whether it's good or bad or otherwise?
Yeah,
Very
psychological
good.
Right,
safety is
next
like,
question, let's go.
yeah, so
Next.
important. We got you.
Okay, this one is really good one. Okay, this one is to Tara. So, or Tara, sorry. Is the applicant pool for remote workers dominated by females and non-white males, per Tara's earlier comment? If not, what is the disconnect between applicant pool and desire to be back in an office? What will
I think,
close the gap?
yeah, so I think the difference is that all the companies that have decided to allow people to work remote or hybrid, and then some people could come back. What I'm saying is a lot of the people who are coming back are the white men, because you know, they're not at home doing other stuff in some cases, and so therefore, if you are working with traditional management behavior where you have to be like, you know, you have to be in the office to be seen to be working, all that kind of stuff. Now, I would imagine 2 years of doing it really well would have taught a load of managers, but I still meet, like Elon Musk came out last week, everybody would think he's pretty enlightened, and he is saying that everybody needs to be back in the factory working. And I just think that, an awful lot of people who would not necessarily, or maybe feel uncomfortable, you know, where there isn't a lot of diversity, feel that they do better remotely. That's what I think. And I think for people who can't decide, I'm going to leave and start in somewhere else, I think it's an opportunity to actually be happier. Really, really
And we
happy.
don't, yeah, we don't have a particularly female team. We have a very good mix.
We're
So
split.
yeah,
Much more diverse than if it was only in Ireland, because the idea that the best person for the job is within a 20 radius of you is ridiculous, like, you know.
We do see
Another question.
we do see around 67-70% women in remotely, just throwing that in there, and definitely a lot of other aspects of diversity as well, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you make sure your partner vendors do not snitch the talents you hired? Do you impose any restrictive covenants on your employees?
Be a great company.
I think for contractors, you can't actually impose a restrictive covenant, because at that point you're creating an employer relationship. So that is something that you have to be a bit careful with. But here's the thing, work on your retention instead. Make it so that they want to stay there, right? Because again, it's very easy to snatch people away with more money, but that means, wait a minute, have you been underpaying this person? Firstly. Secondly, oh, it's very easy to snatch people away because they identify with the culture. Well, firstly, you haven't been transparent about your culture, so then the person can identify and self-select themselves in or out. So I would kind of put that back.
Yeah,
for sure. If somebody wants to leave, it's probably a good thing. Find somebody who's more aligned.
Create great alumni. Create the thing that people out of your company are amazing, and then people will kind of see that, and then
absolutely
come back. Don't be afraid of people potentially needing to leave.
Perfect, perfect. Which benefits can we give if we have a small budget in the company, like startups? Okay, the first benefit that's the highest rated that we see is obviously health insurance. With SafetyWing, it can be maybe like $100 a month or so. So if you don't have budget for that, what could be another benefit that you guys, maybe is less than $100 a month or a few bucks?
I've seen like we had at a company that I used to work at before, we had a wellness stipend where basically it used to be, so it's not necessarily like a gym membership, so here you go just for the gym. It's a wellness stipend. It was usually about £50 a month, and then they could use it. For example, I used to use it for my monthly facial, so I can go and just feel fabulous and a little bit of self-care. Other people use it for a private one-on-one yoga session or whatever it may be. So that could be another one. But again, cash benefit, be careful about taxation.
Yeah, but they also seem expensive, because like a massage or a facial, right? Could be around 100.
I think
contributing towards that.
There is sometimes an over emphasis on things like this, and I think not to forget that creating an environment where people can work fully flexibly, fully remotely, they are trusted, they are empowered, moving in that async style, maybe things like unlimited leave and allowing people to work from wherever they want, like that in itself is an incredible benefit. I'm not saying not to do all these other great things, but make your culture itself the benefit, because that's what people are going to value over and above, other things.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And there's a lot of questions on EOR, so I don't think I'm going to take them because they're so specific. I think you'd rather reach out to Tara as well as Sarah,
Sure.
and they'd be able to help. And also, somebody was asking Tara how was the spelling of Hofy? And actually, Maria is from Hofy, and it's HOFY. So
up there, guys, up there.
Yeah.
This is the logo.
It's amazing. It's
So
like
cool.
it's like being given lots of money to spend in a candy shop. It's like, oh, so exciting.
Tech candy shop of all places.
Yeah, even better, even better.
So yeah, definitely reach out to Maria if you have any questions about Hofy. She can send you to the right place. We only have 1 minute left, and there's a lot of other questions. Is there a tech stack community? Could you name one or two? A tech stack community.
Slack communities. So usually there are a few. I would say go with the language that you require. So for example, if you require Go, there's Go First. There's Women Who Go. There are TypeScript, for example, JavaScript, whatever it may be. Go with the technology that you require more than anything else in the dev community.
Okay, perfect. And then someone says we consistently encounter challenges around tools not supporting people outside the US. A specific example is expense management. Having to use tools for different groups of employees easily leads to inequity in a variety of ways. Any suggestions for where to find these resources?
Yeah, I mean, lean into the companies that are focusing on solving a global problem, like all of us here. And, there are others, but yeah, trying to find a tech that works in this country only means you're going to have to find 15 other techs that work in their countries later. So, yeah.
Well, I hope this was helpful, guys. We're at time. I want to respect everybody's time. I want to thank you, Tara, Maria, Sarah. Please reach out to us, connect with us. Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you for coming.
So great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye, guys.